So I was probably in the 10th grade playing rec church league basketball. And if you've ever played rec league, church league basketball, you know that it's ridiculously competitive. Like, people get really heated over church league basketball, especially guys. Well, in the 10th grade, I'm not any good at basketball. And this story will show that. Because there was a guy who was playing point guard on our team. I don't think he liked me. He didn't like me. And he didn't want to throw me the ball because he knew I was terrible at basketball. So I was standing to the right of the court, near just the corner of the basketball court, and he comes down the court with a ball, point guard coming down the court with the ball. He looks my direction, and then he throws the ball my way. But what was crazy is that when he threw the ball my way, I ducked. Literally, just ducked, like pulled my head down, ducked, and the ball sailed over my head out of bounds. Now, what I was thinking in that moment was that there was somebody behind me that was supposed to catch this ball because he couldn't possibly be throwing it to me. But he was. And everybody laughed. My parents were in the audience. They thought it was funny and ridiculous. Like, it's just that highlighted my failure as a basketball player. And I mean, people who could catch passes thrown their direction, that shows their success. So, here's why I wanted to tell you that story today. When we look at the story of the prodigal son, it's easy for us to glance over the fact that there's a failure in this story, but if we were living in that time, hearing Jesus tell this story live, like Jesus is sitting there and we're in the audience, we would have known that there was a failure in the same way that everybody that was watching that basketball game knew that I failed at basketball. Like, we don't catch it today because our culture is different. But if we were there, we would know, because we would know what it was supposed to look like versus what it did look like. All the stuff I'm about to share with you, I would highly encourage you to read Tim Keller's Prodigal God book, because in that book he unpacks all of this way better than I do, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Because here's the deal. The older son was gifted a majority of the estate. So, like, the older son would have gotten 2/3 of the estate. The younger son in the prodigal son story would have gotten 1/3 of the estate. Now, why in the world would they have done that? Why would the father have done that? Well, the reason the father would have done that was because he would have looked at the oldest son and would have said, look, your job is to keep the family together. Your job is to steward these resources for the betterment of the family. You're supposed to use these resources to help the family grow, to keep the family together. So that when the people hearing the story of the prodigal son originally heard it, they would have known that there was a failure, because the older son, instead of going after the younger son, which was his job, the older son stays in the field. The younger son goes off, blows 1/3 of the father's estate, just as in the muck and the mire, and it's nasty. And everybody listening would have gone, it was the older son's job to go out and bring the younger son back. They would have known that. But he didn't do it. He didn't do it. He stayed in the field. He wasn't even connected to the heart of the father, because the father throws a party when the son comes home, and the son doesn't even know what's going on. You can read all this in Luke 15, 25 through 32. But see, I believe that this story is being told by Jesus to juxtapose, to compare the older son's failure, which was the religious leaders. The religious leaders of the day should have been after the heart of the father, being willing to go get the prodigals, the tax collectors, and the sinners, and welcome them back home into the father's house. But they didn't do it. They failed. But here's the good news. Jesus didn't fail. Jesus is the good older brother. Because what the older brother should have done was gone out into the world and gone and tried to track down the younger brother. There's a story that I read from Tim Keller. He was talking about this boy, basically. I mean, he was a very young man, went over to Vietnam in order to fight. And I think he was drafted, and he disappeared, missing in action. And the family was devastated. They went through all the channels they could to try to figure out where he was. They went through all the official channels, the State Department, trying to figure out what happened to their son. Nobody could give them any answers. Nobody knew what happened to their son. So the boy's older brother, at his own expense, gets on an airplane, leaves the comfort of America, and goes to the war-torn country of Vietnam to track down his younger brother. People were so in awe that he would do that they just simply referred to him as the brother. Like the North Vietnamese wouldn't touch him, the South Vietnamese wouldn't touch him. They let him have free roam because they saw the older brother's love and the fact he loved the family, he loved his parents, and he loved his younger brother, and he was willing to put himself in harm's way to try to bring his younger brother home. And that is a picture of what Jesus does. If Jesus is God's firstborn son, and we are all, as Christians, children of God, that means that Jesus is our older brother. And what Jesus did was he left the comfort of heaven and came to earth to go get the prodigals like you and me. That's what he did. See, he wasn't like the older brother in the prodigal son story who failed, who didn't connect to the heart of the Father. Jesus saw that the heart of the Father was for the people who were lost, and he wanted them to come home. And Jesus says, at my own expense, I will go to earth and bring them back for you. Listen, I know and I hope that these messages are being watched by people who aren't just Christians but are non-Christians as well. This is the Christian gospel. This is what we believe. We don't believe that we're good enough to earn God's love. We believe that Jesus Christ came to earth to rescue us from the muck, the mire, and the nastiness of what we got ourselves into. And when we say it was at his own expense, it was absolutely at his own expense, because what did he do? He went to a cross. Nails in his wrists, nails in his feet. He gave his life at his own expense to bring us home. And that's why we as prodigals, like the younger son, can turn around out of our nasty, muck-mired life that we get ourselves into. We can turn around and come home to Jesus, come home to our Heavenly Father, because Jesus has paid the penalty. So all the Father has to do is say, it's been forgiven, it's been paid for. So, like I said, Tim Keller's Prodigal God, it's awesome, you should read it, but this is something that has just truly impacted me because this is the gospel. So, I hope this was encouraging. I hope you guys have a great Thursday, and I'm sure I will see you soon.